When night falls, the darkness starts to speak. Between each breath and the silence there are whispers no one was meant to hear. This is Night Whispers, where the dark has a story to tell. When I was a kid, there were things I saw and felt that never made sense. Shadows in familiar places, whispers in the dark moments that refuse to stay memories. I've tried not to think about them, but they always find their way back creeping in when I least expect it. Maybe writing them down will help me understand, or maybe it'll just remind me that some things are better left unexplained. It all started at boarding school. I started there in 8th grade and stayed through most of high school, long enough for the place to feel more like a cage than a campus. My roommate was a quiet kid named Weston, awkward, polite, and always watching things too closely. We weren't friends, just two names sharing a room. It was small, plain, forgettable. But sometimes, the simplest places hide the darkest secrets. It didn't take long before Weston's oddities began to surface. One afternoon, without warning, he handed me a folded piece of paper like it was some kind of rule book. I thought it was a joke until I opened it. The list was bizarre things no normal person would ever think to forbid. He never smiled, never explained, just watched me read it with that hollow, expectant look. As if the act itself wasn't odd enough, the list was pure nonsense. Scrawled in neat, deliberate handwriting were rules that felt more like superstitions than requests. No frogs, no mirrors, no salt, each line stranger than the last. I remember laughing at first, asking if he was serious, but Weston didn't even blink. He just stared at me like I'd broken some silent code, and suddenly the room felt smaller, heavier, almost guarded. But the strangest rule, the one that truly unsettled me, was about salt. Of all things, salt. Who banned something so ordinary? I joked that I didn't plan on seasoning the dorm, but Weston didn't laugh. He just tightened his jaw and looked away like the word itself bothered him. Food wasn't even allowed in the room, so his warning made no sense. Still, the seriousness in his eyes told me it wasn't a joke. I kept wondering what danger salt could possibly hold. It wasn't like people were allergic to it or anything. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made, but Weston's face stayed grave, almost fearful. It wasn't a prank. I could see that now. Whatever reason he had, it wasn't something he was willing to share. The way he stared at that list like it carried real power made my skin crawl. Weston had this eerie habit of whispering to himself at night, not soft mumbling, but full conversations with someone who wasn't there. I'd wake to his voice, low and urgent words I couldn't quite catch. Sometimes I thought I heard another voice answering, but the room was always empty. At first, it just scared me. Later, it started feeling like he wasn't. After a while, even his late-night whispers faded into background noise. What caught my attention next was the small notebook he guarded like treasure. He never let it leave his sight, tucking it beneath his mattress every time he left. I thought it held secrets of a shy kid, maybe drawings or private thoughts, but curiosity is a cruel thing. One afternoon when Weston was gone, I gave in and reached under his bed to find out. When I finally pulled the notebook out, most of its pages were blank except for a few near the middle. My stomach dropped the moment I saw what was written there, a long list of names, carefully handwritten, many of them crossed out. It wasn't a diary or a story. It looked more like a record, a countdown, and for some reason, the list wasn't finished. As I skimmed through the list, a chill ran down my spine. These weren't random names. I recognized several. Kids from our school, some from my own classes. My pulse quickened as my eyes darted to the last page, and there it was, my name, not crossed out, just sitting there waiting. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or doomed. There were no notes, no explanations, just names, half erased, half waiting their turn. I studied the list, searching for patterns, a date, a reason, anything, but it was just names, plain and chilling in their simplicity. Still, the way Weston guarded that notebook made it feel heavier than paper should. If not for his obsession, I might have dismissed it as petty grudges or teenage weirdness. But there was something about the way each name was written, too careful, too deliberate, that made me feel like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. After that day, I couldn't look at Weston the same way. The memory of that list clung to me like a bad dream. Every time I caught his eyes, I swore he knew his stare felt sharper, longer, almost accusing. Nights became restless, and even silence felt dangerous. He didn't have to say a word. The tension between us said enough. I started keeping my distance, though. Somehow his presence filled the room more than ever. That quiet dread followed me everywhere, a weight I couldn't shake off. I started avoiding my own dorm, drifting from one friend's room to another just to breathe easier. For a while, it helped until the night it didn't. I woke up suddenly, heart pounding, unsure why. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the silence was listening. For a split second, I thought it was just another nightmare. But then I realized I wasn't dreaming. I blinked into the darkness, trying to make sense of the faint shapes around me. At first, I thought I was hearing Weston's usual whispers, but the room was dead silent. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw him. He was standing right beside my bed, motionless, a crooked smile frozen on his face. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared down at me like he'd been waiting for me to wake up. My blood turned cold. His hands hung in the air, caught mid-motion like he'd been reaching for me before something made him stop. Instinct took over. I screamed and bolted upright, heart hammering in my throat. But Weston didn't move. Not a twitch, not a blink. That same eerie smile stayed plastered on his face, wide and wrong. The stillness was worse than any attack. It felt like he was frozen between thoughts, one heartbeat away from doing something unspeakable. When I finally managed to ask what he was doing, his answer was almost laughable. "You were talking in your sleep." That was it. No apology, no hint of embarrassment. Just that same empty grin, as if standing over someone's bed in the dead of night was perfectly ordinary. I wanted to argue, to shout, but the words died in my throat. The longer he smiled, the more I realized whatever that was, it wasn't just sleepwalking. Without saying a word, Weston turned and calmly climbed back into his bed as if nothing had happened. I didn't sleep another second that night. The darkness felt alive around me. When morning came, daylight gave me just enough courage to ask him about it, but Weston only frowned, tilting his head like he truly didn't remember. That blank confusion was somehow more terrifying than any threat. He didn't sound angry, just dismissive, like I'd told him a bad joke. "Okay, man, whatever you say," he muttered, and that was it. I couldn't tell if he was lying through his teeth or if he truly had no memory of standing over me. Somehow both options felt horrifying. After that, the fear deepened, not only of Weston, but of the room itself and whatever unseen thing lingered in it. It sounds irrational, but the fear started clinging to the walls. Even when Weston was gone, it felt like traces of him, his silence, his stare still lingered in the air. I couldn't relax, couldn't breathe right inside that room anymore. Then about a week later, I walked in one night and froze. A small garden snake lay coiled on my bedspread, alive and moving. I swear it was really there. A real living snake writhed across my sheets, its scales glinting under the lamp. I screamed before I could stop myself, and Weston turned slowly from his desk, face, empty eyes, unreadable. He muttered an apology, said it was just a prank. But no part of me believed that. My voice shook as I demanded to know where he'd even found it. Weston tilted his head, confusion flickering for a moment, before replying in a calm, chilling tone. "What do you mean, they're everywhere?" "They're everywhere." His words echoed in my head, calm and certain as if he were stating a fact. I didn't dare respond one wrong word, and I felt he might snap. Sure, the campus was near the woods, but I had never seen a single snake before. Then Weston did something that froze my blood. He opened a glass jar on his desk, and the snake lifted its head, gliding inside on its own, obedient, almost eager, like it belonged to him. I couldn't wrap my head around it, how a wild snake could act so tame, so obedient. The whole scene felt wrong, like I'd witnessed something that defied nature. Even now, words don't capture how disturbing it really was. I should have reported him, but I didn't. I was young, naive, and too scared of what Weston might do if I crossed him. That's what you have to remember. I was only 13, too young to understand how to handle fear that real. For days, I tried to convince myself things would calm down, that Weston's strangeness was just harmless weirdness. Then a few nights later, everything changed. I woke up frozen, unable to move or breathe. Above me, a black mass twisted across the ceiling, shifting like smoke, but pulsing like something alive. My nightmare had just begun. The thing above me wasn't just a shadow. It pulsed, swelled, and shifted like it was breathing. A shapeless blur between smoke and flesh, gliding lower until it hovered right over my bed. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. I could only watch as something long and thin, like a claw, slid out from the mass. It scraped across my bed frame, slow and deliberate, before turning its reach toward me. Just before it touched me, the thing jerked back violently as if something unseen had burned it. Then, chaos erupted. The mass whipped around the room faster than my eyes could follow, slamming into walls and scattering papers like a storm. Desks rattled, the closet door banged open, and in one final shriek of motion it shot toward the window. The glass exploded outward, shards glittering in the dark, and the thing vanished into the night. The sound of breaking glass jolted me fully awake, but something was wrong. My head was already turned toward the window like I'd been staring at it the entire time. My heart stopped when I saw it. The window wasn't just cracked, it was shattered splinters of glass still falling to the floor, catching the faint moonlight as they dropped. Whatever I'd seen in that dream hadn't stayed in my head. It had happened right there. Everything in the room was exactly as it had been in the dream. Every detail matched down to the overturned chair and scattered papers. I knew I was awake now, but my body refused to move, locked in terror. My gaze drifted from the shattered window to my bed frame, and that's when I saw them deep, jagged scratches carved into the wood in the same spot where the claw had dragged across in my nightmare. The terror stayed even as the paralysis faded. The moment I could move, I shot up my mind, clinging to one explanation: Weston. He had to be behind this. I stumbled to his bed, ready to catch him pretending, but he was out cold, breathing slow and steady, even snoring. I shook him hard, calling his name, certain he was faking. Yet no matter how violently I tried, Weston didn't stir, not even once. I kept shaking him harder each time, praying he'd open his eyes, because if he didn't, that meant something far worse. The fear twisted inside me, split in two, half terrified of Weston, half terrified it hadn't been him at all. The idea that my nightmare might have been real made my hands tremble uncontrollably. I wanted him to wake up just to prove I wasn't alone, but deep down, I dreaded what he might say if he did. I wanted so badly to blame him, to have someone, anyone, to share the horror with. If it was Weston's fault, then at least it was human. But he wouldn't wake up no matter how I tried. The weight of it all crushed me. I stumbled back to my bed, curled into myself, and cried until my throat ached. The shattered window was real. The wrecked room was real. And the silence that followed was unbearable. The claw marks were still there, carved deep into the wood, proof I wasn't dreaming. Then Weston stirred. For a moment his face mirrored my shock, and I thought maybe finally we were on the same side. But that hope shattered fast. His expression hardened, and he started yelling, accusing me of tearing up the room, of going through his things. The absurdity of it hit me like a slap. He was the unstable one, not me. Weston's voice twisted into something inhuman. He began hissing low and sharp like a feral cat. Then he shouted words in a language I'd never heard before, guttural and harsh, each syllable vibrating with anger. My instincts screamed that he was about to lunge at me. The rest became a blur: shouting, movement, fear. The next thing I knew, our RA burst through the door, eyes wide, dragging us both into the hallway as I struggled to breathe. They moved me to an empty room for the night, and I fell asleep clutching my blanket like armor. When I woke, the air was ice cold. It took me a moment to notice the reason the window was wide open, curtains swaying in the wind. I was certain I'd shut it before sleeping. No one else had a key. That simple, impossible detail shattered every rational thought I had left. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over. Any sense of logic I had left vanished the moment I saw that open window. Later, an RA told me to grab my belongings from my old room. When I got there, Weston was gone, every trace of him. His desk, his clothes, even his notebook had disappeared like he'd never existed. No one explained a thing. They just handed me a new key and a new roommate like nothing had ever happened. When I asked what happened to Weston, the staff's answer was cold and final: he's no longer your concern. And that was it. I never saw him again. The rest of my years there blur together like my mind chose to erase them for survival. Maybe it did. Whatever haunted Weston, whatever haunted that room, I don't want to understand it anymore. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. I just hope I left mine behind. I've replayed that night in my head countless times, searching for a logical answer, but nothing fits. The glass had shattered outward, proof it came from inside. If something had struck it from outside, debris would have been everywhere. And Weston, he couldn't have done it. He'd been in a dead sleep, snoring, lifeless. I'd woken up too fast, too soon for him to have faked it. Every explanation unravels, leaving only one chilling possibility: it wasn't human. If it had been Weston, I would have seen him move. But I didn't. Something else was in that room that night, something I still can't name, and the thought that my nightmare was real will haunt me forever. Every summer my parents sent me to my grandparents' farm in Pennsylvania, a lonely house surrounded by 40 acres of whispering woods. It should have been peaceful, but even then the silence out there felt like it was watching me. It wasn't much of a farm really, just endless trees swallowing the fields. My cousin Francisco came later in the summer since our parents didn't want to overwhelm our grandparents. I always had the first half of July. He got the last of August. The house itself was old and tall, 3 floors high, though the third was just an attic, one small creaking room that had once belonged to my dad. That little attic room was mine for those 2 weeks. The ceiling sloped so low I could touch it from my bed, and a single window faced the woods out back. At night, the trees looked like a black ocean. My grandparents always went to sleep before 9, and my parents had taught me it was rude to stay up after them. So after their good night, I'd lie awake in the quiet, waiting for sleep that never came. Most nights, I'd kill time reading with a flashlight or playing my old Game Boy, the tiny screen glowing in the dark. There wasn't much else to do out there. The first summer was peaceful, nothing strange, nothing scary. But the second year, things changed. One of those first nights, as I read beneath the covers, I heard its soft, deliberate footsteps climbing the attic stairs toward my room. The footsteps were soft, almost careful, like whoever it was didn't want to be heard. My eyes locked on the door as the handle turned and the door creaked open a few inches. Panic shot through me. I snapped off my flashlight and shut my eyes, pretending to sleep. I figured it was just Grandma checking in, making sure I wasn't up too late. But after that, nothing, no footsteps leaving, no door closing, just silence thick enough to feel. There were no fading footsteps, no creak of a closing door, just the heavy quiet of an old house holding its breath. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me into uneasy sleep. The next morning over breakfast, I told Grandpa what I'd heard. He chuckled, said the place was ancient, always settling, and that raccoons sometimes made their way into the walls. I nodded, pretending to believe him. But deep down, I knew better. I had seen the handle turn slow and deliberate, and whatever had been on the other side of that door had moved like a person. I convinced myself it had just been Grandma checking on me and tried to forget. But 3 nights later, I woke, or thought I did, to my bed, trembling beneath me. A shadow stood at the foot of it, tall and perfectly still. The room was dark, but I could make out a figure, shoulders hunched, head tilted slightly to one side. I wanted to call out to ask if it was Grandma, but no sound came out. Whoever it was, they just kept watching. I squeezed my eyes shut and counted to 100, each number louder in my head than the last. When I finally looked again, the figure was gone. I told myself it had to be a dream, but it didn't feel like one. The next morning proved it. My closet door stood wide open, even though I remembered closing it. That small, impossible detail shattered my certainty of ever having slept at all. As ridiculous as it sounds, I started thinking Grandma had been watching me sleep. It was the only explanation that didn't make me lose my mind. Maybe she was forgetful, maybe just lonely old age can do that right. Still, the thought unsettled me deeply. I wanted to ask her to know for sure, but fear held me back. I couldn't risk hurting her feelings or finding out I was wrong. The same strange things kept happening over the next week. Soft footsteps, doors shifting, that awful feeling of being watched. By the time Mom came to pick me up, I couldn't wait to leave. I told her everything on the drive home, every sound and shadow. She just laughed, said Grandma never left bed after 9, and called me imaginative. Old houses creak, she said. But I knew it wasn't the house. Mom mentioned that Francisco had never said a word about anything strange, and that stung more than I expected. Maybe I really had imagined it. But the next summer proved otherwise. The same noises, the same shadow by my bed. I never saw a face, yet I was sure it was Grandma. After that, I started going to bed earlier, thinking if I fell asleep fast enough, the night wouldn't have time to find me. Years passed, and eventually my parents stopped sending me to the farm. I never said it out loud, but I was relieved. The memories there had soured. When I was in college, my grandparents passed away within weeks of each other. Their funeral was painfully quiet, the kind of sadness that hung in the air. Between condolences, I found myself surrounded by distant relatives, faces I barely remembered, making small talk when all I wanted was to leave. Among the relatives was Francisco, my cousin, though we'd never been close despite being the same age. Talking to him felt awkward, like speaking to a stranger with a familiar face. Within a minute, I realized we had nothing in common anymore. The only real link between us was that farm, those long summers that felt both endless and haunted. Still, curiosity got the better of me, and I brought it up, unsure if he'd even remember. Trying to fill the silence, I asked Francisco about the farm. It seemed like a safe topic, something neutral we both shared. I told him everything: the footsteps, the figure by my bed, the closet door that never stayed shut. I even confessed my old theory that maybe it had been Grandma all along. I expected a laugh, maybe a teasing grin. Instead, his face went still, the color draining, as if I'd just said something forbidden. Francisco's face stayed blank as he muttered words that froze my blood. "That's nothing. That thing used to touch me." I just stared, waiting for a laugh that never came. Then he began describing things far worse than what I'd seen: the same dark figure appearing every few nights, standing at the foot of his bed. Only it didn't just watch him. It reached out. It touched. Francisco said the mattress would dip as if something invisible had sat beside him. Then fingers, cold and coarse, would trace his face, linger at his wrist, gripping tight before letting go. He'd stay perfectly still, eyes shut, praying it would leave. When I asked how he knew it wasn't Grandma or Grandpa, he just whispered, "Because their hands were soft. This one's weren't. They felt wrong." I stared at him in disbelief, my heart pounding. Why would anyone keep something like that secret? When I finally asked, Francisco shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't keep it," he said. "I told my mom a bunch of times." His eyes dropped to the floor. She didn't believe me. She yelled, said I was trying to scare her. That part seemed to hurt the most. He said he eventually stopped talking about it, convincing himself that if he just stayed still and kept his eyes shut, the thing would leave him alone. Hearing that sent chills through me. It didn't just validate what I'd seen, it magnified it. Suddenly, my memories weren't imagination anymore. They were proof of something real and terrifying. After that, Francisco and I never mentioned it again. The silence between us said enough. We both wanted to bury that nightmare where it belonged, deep in the past with our childhood. But sometimes when I think about those nights, I still wonder. If it wasn't Grandma standing by my bed, then what was it? The way Francisco called it a thing still chills me, like even naming it might bring it back. Sometimes I try to rationalize it, to tell myself it must have been a person, a trespasser, a drifter, someone hiding where they didn't belong. But then I imagine what that would mean: a stranger living in my grandparents' house, slipping through the halls at night, watching us sleep for years. I don't know which possibility is worse, the idea of a ghost or the thought that it was human all along. When I was 9, my world was a narrow slice of suburbia, a cramped townhouse pressed between two identical ones where walls felt too close and shadows lingered too long. My room was on the 3rd floor, high enough to feel private except for the window. From there, I could see straight into the house behind ours, barely 20 feet away. The two buildings were so close it felt like we shared the same air. For years, that opposite window stayed empty, just a reflection of my own. Still, out of habit or curiosity, I'd glance at it from time to time, half expecting to see someone looking back. Then one afternoon, something finally changed. For the first time, there was someone in that window, a girl about my age with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and a bright yellow sweater that caught the light. She smiled softly and waved almost shyly. I hesitated, unsure what to do, but waved back anyway. It felt oddly comforting. From that day on, every afternoon after school, she'd be there waiting, our silent greeting becoming part of my routine. Every day at exactly 3:30, she'd appear at her window as if waiting for me. Always the same yellow sweater, the same gentle smile. We made up games. She'd hold up little drawings, and I'd try to guess what they were. I'd flash my homework pages, and she'd give me a thumbs up or down like a secret judge. On warm afternoons, I'd open my window to talk, but she never opened hers, not even once. Whenever I tried speaking to her, she only smiled and pointed to her ear, mouthing that she couldn't hear me through the glass. I assumed her parents didn't allow her to open the window. Eventually, curiosity won. I asked Mom about the girl. She said the Murphys lived there, an old couple with no kids, maybe a granddaughter, she guessed. Knowing she might leave someday made me strangely sad, but she never did. Every afternoon, like clockwork, she appeared at her window and we played our silent games until dusk. Then one night, weeks later, I woke up to a faint tapping. At first I thought it was part of a dream, but when it came again slow and deliberate against the glass, I realized it was real. I crept to my window, heart pounding, and there she was, the girl in the yellow sweater. It was strange seeing her at that hour. She'd never appeared outside of the afternoon, but this time she wasn't smiling. Her face looked pale in the moonlight. She pointed downward towards something I couldn't see, then pressed her hands together as if pleading for help. I just stood there, frozen. I had no idea what she wanted, but something about her desperate movements terrified me. I crawled back into bed, pulling the covers over my head. The tapping went on slow, rhythmic for several minutes before fading away. For 3 days, her window stayed empty. Guilt crept in. Maybe I'd hurt her feelings. But on the 4th night, I woke to the same sound. She was there again, both hands pressed flat against the glass, staring straight at me. Her lips moved quickly, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass. Each exhale left a white mist on her window, even though the night was warm, too warm for fog. Over and over, she mouthed the same phrase, and I finally recognized it. "Help me." My stomach dropped. Then she stepped back into the dim light of her room, and that's when I saw it, a dark spreading stain across her yellow sweater right over her chest. The dark stain on her yellow sweater looked thick, wet, like paint or something worse. Panic hit me, and I bolted to my parents' room, tears streaming down my face. My dad rushed back with me, but when he looked out my window, the lights in the opposite house were off. The girl was gone. My mom held me close, whispering that it was only a bad dream, that I'd imagined everything. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. The next afternoon, when the girl still hadn't appeared, curiosity got the better of me. I climbed the back fence and spotted Mrs. Murphy tending to her garden. She smiled warmly when she saw me, even though we'd never spoken before. I waved and asked about the girl in the 3rd-floor window. Her smile faded instantly. She set down her watering can, wiped her hands on her apron, and stepped closer to the fence, her expression suddenly tight and uneasy. The sudden way Mrs. Murphy's smile vanished sent a chill down my spine. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked how long I'd been seeing the girl. "A few weeks," I said. She pressed further. What did the girl look like? I told her, about the dark hair, the yellow sweater, and how she never opened her window. Mrs. Murphy's face turned pale. "Go back inside," she said softly but firmly. I thought I'd done something wrong. After that day, everything changed. I was almost certain Mrs. Murphy had called my mom, and the thought made my stomach twist. I was definitely in trouble. That night, my parents moved my bed to the opposite wall and hung thick, heavy curtains that swallowed every bit of light. When I asked why, Mom just smiled and said it would help me sleep better. But I could tell by the way she avoided my eyes something wasn't right. They were hiding something from me. The next afternoon on our drive home, Mom spoke without looking at me. She said I wasn't allowed to play the waving game anymore. When I asked why, she simply replied that I was too old for imaginary friends. I protested, insisting the girl was real, that I'd seen her for months. But Mom's tone stayed firm, distant. "No more windows," she said. I sank back in silence, confusion and hurt swirling inside me like something heavy I couldn't name. No one ever told me what really happened. The girl never appeared again, and just like that, my only friend was gone. My parents treated the whole thing as if I'd done something wrong, like seeing her was some kind of misbehavior. I couldn't talk to them about it. Even looking out the window felt like breaking a rule. Eventually, about a year later, we moved away. I thought leaving that house would mean leaving the memories, too. It wasn't until high school that Mom finally told me the truth, or at least what Mrs. Murphy had said. The house's previous owners once had a daughter named Jenna. She'd been only 11 when a car struck her right outside moments after school. Mom's voice softened as she added the detail that made my stomach twist. Jenna had been wearing a yellow sweater the day she died. The family moved out not long after the accident. When the Murphys bought the place, they tried using the 3rd-floor room but eventually sealed it off after things kept happening, as Mom put it. She didn't elaborate. I don't think she even knew the details. She just said Mrs. Murphy was a deeply spiritual woman. I'm 34 now, but that window still haunts me sometimes. I live in a house now where no window faces another building, and that's no coincidence. Somewhere along the way, I developed a quiet fear of windows, of reflections, of seeing something looking back. Over the years, I've dreamed of the girl a few times. They're never nightmares. She always looks calm, her yellow sweater spotless, just like before that final terrible night. In my dreams, she never smiles the way she once did, just stares calm and distant. It's one of those haunting memories that will never make sense. Beta 0, 0 used queries, 1. Thank you for staying until the end. If the dark didn't scare you away, maybe you belong here. Subscribe to Night Whispers and let the darkness find you again next time.